The gentle hum of the ceiling fan barely registered with Liam as he sat motionless on the couch, his eyes fixed on the TV, though his mind was far elsewhere. For months now he had been grappling with a growing sense of unease. Something between him and Victoria had shifted. Where warmth and affection once existed, there was now a palpable coldness. Her behavior had changed: late nights at work stretching into the early hours, unexpected weekend trips lasting for days. None of it made sense anymore. Maybe I'm just overthinking it, he often told himself. They had been married for 7 years, and he wanted to trust her, to believe in her. But today felt different. The silence of the house weighed heavily on him, tightening the knot of anxiety in his stomach. He glanced at the bedroom door, which had been shut for nearly 2 hours. Victoria had barely spoken after dinner, and the quiet was unsettling. Suddenly the door creaked, shattering the oppressive silence. Liam held his breath as Victoria stepped out, wearing an incredibly short and revealing dress, something completely out of character for her. Confusion swept over him. Why was she dressed like that? Where could she possibly be going? "Where are you going?" he asked, his voice tinged with both curiosity and rising concern. Victoria didn't respond immediately. She walked over to the hallway mirror, adjusting the straps of her dress, a faint smirk forming on her lips. Her calm indifference ignited a flicker of irritation in Liam. "Where are you going?" he asked again, his voice louder now as he rose from the couch. Finally, Victoria turned to face him, her eyes betraying an emotion he couldn't quite identify, something cold and detached. She stepped closer, crossing her arms as if she were about to make a casual remark. "Alexander is picking me up tonight," she said, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. Liam blinked, struggling to process the shock. Alexander, his best friend? They hadn't spoken in weeks, and as far as he knew, Alexander wasn't even in town. "What do you mean Alexander is picking you up?" he asked, his voice tense, fists clenching unconsciously. Victoria's smile grew wider, savoring the confusion and anger building within him. "We're going to have some fun," she said mockingly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "And when I get back, I'll tell you all the juicy details." She turned toward the door, grabbing her purse. Pausing with her hand on the doorknob, she added, "Maybe I'll even show you how he did it." Her words hit him like a punch, and before he could fully grasp what was happening, he was on his feet, rage boiling inside him. "What the hell are you talking about?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house. His heart raced as he stormed toward her, disbelief clouding his thoughts. This couldn't be real, it couldn't be happening. But Victoria didn't flinch. Her smile remained cold and fixed in place, her eyes daring him. Liam's chest tightened as he pointed toward the door. "If you walk out of this house, don't even think about coming back," he warned, his words reverberating through the room. Yet she remained unfazed, her triumphant smile never wavering. Without another word, she flung open the door, letting in the crisp night air, and left without a backward glance. Liam stood frozen, staring at the door long after it had closed, the full weight of what had just happened pressed down on him. For a moment he was unable to move, his thoughts spinning wildly, trying to grasp the reality that had just shattered his world. But a flood of images overwhelmed his mind: Victoria entwined with Alexander, her laughter mingling with their whispered words. His stomach churned with disgust. What was he supposed to do now? His phone sat beside him, silent and still. For a moment he considered calling Alexander, but something stopped him. What would he even say? Could any words change what had already happened? His fingers hovered over the phone, scrolling through his contacts until he landed on Alexander's name. His thumb paused over the screen, but something deep inside held him back. It wasn't fear, it was something far heavier, an overwhelming sense of exhaustion. It wrapped around him like a fog, dragging him into a cold, bleak despair. Even if he called, would Alexander answer? And if he did, would it change anything? Deep down, Liam already knew the answer. Nothing he said could alter the painful truth staring him in the face. It was over. His wife and his best friend were out there somewhere, doing things he couldn't even bear to imagine, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The realization struck him like a physical blow. He slammed the phone down on the table, burying his face in his hands as the weight of the situation threatened to crush him. Suddenly the phone rang, piercing through the suffocating silence. Liam jerked upright, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes flicked to the screen, an unknown number. A wave of confusion washed over him, and his stomach twisted with anxiety. But who could be calling at a time like this? He hesitated for a moment, then answered, "Hello." "Is this Mr. Liam Brown?" The voice on the other end was firm and professional. "Yes, this is Liam," he replied, his voice shaky, still raw from the night's events. His thoughts immediately jumped to Victoria. Had something happened to her? Was this some kind of cruel joke? "This is Officer Robert from the City Police Department," the voice continued, causing Liam's heart to stop. "We have urgent news about your wife." A wave of dread surged through him, and he gripped the phone tighter. What? What happened? The words tumbled out of his mouth before he could think, his mind racing with terrifying possibilities. "There's been an incident. Your wife was found in critical condition at a hotel." Liam's face turned white as the room began to spin. He clutched the edge of the couch, trying to steady himself, his heart pounding violently in his chest. A sickening heaviness settled in his stomach. Critical condition. What? What happened to her? He stammered, his voice shaking. "She was found unconscious. You need to come to the hospital immediately," the officer said, his tone serious, burdened with the gravity of the situation. The words hit Liam like a hammer. He tried to comprehend what was happening, but everything was slipping away too fast. His mouth opened, dozens of questions swirling in his mind, but the officer cut him off. "We'll explain everything when you arrive. Please hurry." The call abruptly ended. Liam sat frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, his mind struggling to make sense of the words he'd just heard. For a moment he was paralyzed, his thoughts racing too fast to hold on to Victoria, the hotel, critical condition. His body reacted automatically while his brain lagged behind, as if disconnected. He snatched his car keys from the counter and rushed out, slamming the door behind him. The drive to the hospital blurred into a haze of flashing streetlights and deserted roads. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his fingers ached, but the world outside seemed irrelevant as everything he knew collapsed inside him. Liam couldn't stop hearing the officer's words, unconscious, in critical condition. Every possible scenario flashed before his mind's eye. Had she been in an accident? Was she seriously hurt? Or worse, had Alexander done something to her? That last thought hit him like an icy wind, and the clear-headedness he once had gave way to a storm of fear and doubt. The road to the hospital felt endless. His hands tightened on the wheel until his knuckles turned white, his thoughts racing faster than the car as his anxiety built. Victoria's life was hanging in the balance, and he was left wondering what had happened. Had things with Alexander spiraled out of control? The image of his wife in danger stirred a whirlwind of emotions: anger at her betrayal, fear for her safety, and a deep confusion about how to feel. How was he supposed to react to all of this? When Liam finally pulled into the hospital parking lot, his heart pounded in his chest, threatening to explode. The flashing lights of an ambulance illuminated the night, casting an eerie glow over the entrance. He jumped out of the car, barely noticing the biting cold as the automatic doors hissed open. The sharp scent of antiseptic hit him immediately, and the waiting room was nearly empty. He rushed to the reception desk, where a nurse sat behind a computer screen. She looked up calmly, her expression professional. "How can I help you, sir?" she asked, her tone polite and steady. "I'm here for Victoria Brown," Liam said quickly, his voice shaking despite his efforts to stay composed. "I got a call. She's in critical condition. I need to see her right now." The nurse's expression softened slightly as she glanced at her screen. "One moment, please." She typed something quickly and nodded. "Room 210. The doctor will meet you there." Liam didn't wait. He turned and sprinted down the hallway, his footsteps echoing in the silence. Questions bombarded his mind. What had happened to Victoria? Was Alexander involved? As he neared room 210, he saw a doctor standing by the door, a tablet in hand. The man's face was somber, his eyes filled with concern. "Mr. Brown?" the doctor asked, stepping forward. Liam nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, how is she?" The doctor hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Your wife is in critical condition," he said slowly, his tone grave. "She has multiple injuries. We found her in a hotel room." Liam's stomach twisted. What? Who? He didn't need to ask. The answer was clear. Alexander. The doctor sighed, his voice lowering. There's something else, he added gently. When we found her, there was something disturbing. We need to remove it from her body before you see her. Liam's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean by remove? I need to see her right now. Panic rose in his voice. The doctor looked down at his tablet before meeting Liam's eyes again. Mr. Brown, I strongly advise you to wait. What you're about to see will be very difficult. I don't care, Liam snapped, his patience gone. He pushed past the doctor and barged into the room. His breath caught in his throat the moment his eyes landed on the hospital bed. Victoria lay there, completely still, her body appearing lifeless. Liam stood frozen, staring at her frail figure under the harsh hospital lights. Her once vibrant skin now looked pale and translucent, with bruises covering her, stark reminders of what she had endured. Her cracked lips were slightly parted, her shallow breaths barely noticeable. The sight of her battered body filled him with unbearable sorrow. But that wasn't the worst of it. As Liam stepped closer, disbelief washed over him. There were tattoos on her skin, rough, uneven words carved into her flesh as if someone had furiously etched them there. His legs buckled, and he gripped a chair to keep from collapsing. His heart pounded, and his mind struggled to make sense of the horror before him. These weren't just random markings, they carried a deliberate, malicious message, one clearly meant for him. A weak voice behind him broke the silence. I'm sorry, Mr. Brown. A doctor had entered the room quietly, his face heavy with concern. We believe her. Lover did this. When we found her, she was barely conscious. The medics think she tried to fight back, but... His words trailed off, the brutality of the scene speaking for itself. Liam's stomach turned and nausea rose in his throat. He turned away from Victoria's mutilated body, trembling from the horror he could barely contain. Anger and disgust surged within him, but beneath those emotions, something darker lurked, a feeling he hadn't anticipated: satisfaction. The word slipped out before he could stop it. Karma, he muttered, his voice trembling. He hadn't meant to say it aloud, but the words escaped him anyway. A part of him was horrified by what had been done to her, yet another part, still deeply wounded by her betrayal, found a twisted sense of justice in her suffering. Victoria had betrayed him for Alexander, his closest friend, abandoning the life they had built together as if it meant nothing. And now she lay there, broken and scarred, her body bearing the brutality of the man she had chosen over him. A soft cough from the doctor interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Mr. Brown, he said gently, I know this is incredibly difficult. We're doing everything we can for her. Her physical injuries will heal in time, but emotionally it will take much longer. The doctor's words barely registered. Liam's mind was clouded, his eyes locked on Victoria's face, a face once so familiar, now alien. Pity and revulsion warred within him. Should he stay and comfort her? Or should he walk away and never return? He couldn't decide. What now? He asked, his voice hollow, void of emotion. The doctor sighed softly. We'll stabilize her condition, but she'll need long-term care, both physical and psychological. The authorities have been notified, and they'll handle her attacker. For now, our priority is her recovery. Liam nodded absently, his emotions numb, distant. Victoria had made her choice. She had left him, thrown away their life together for Alexander, and now the man she had trusted had revealed himself to be nothing more than a violent predator. The doctor spoke again, his voice breaking through Liam's foggy thoughts. Mr. Brown, I have to ask, do you want to be involved in her ongoing care? Liam was stunned. Did he want to? Could he? His eyes drifted back to the frail figure lying on the hospital bed. Memories of the woman she used to be, the one he had loved, flooded his mind, but that woman was gone. In her place was the person who had betrayed him. I don't know, Liam whispered, his voice barely audible. I need time. The doctor nodded sympathetically. Take all the time you need. We'll keep you updated on her condition. Liam lingered a moment longer, his gaze locked on the broken form of the woman who had once shattered his world and was now herself shattered. He inhaled deeply, feeling the crushing weight of everything on his shoulders, then finally turned toward the door. His mind whirled in a storm of uncertainty, unsure of how to feel or what to do next. As he stepped out of the hospital room, the cold air in the hallway hit him, bringing a strange sense of relief. The brutal truth had been revealed, and it was more devastating than he had ever imagined. The restless days that followed were filled with conversations he never thought he'd have to endure. Sitting at the dining table, the full weight of the situation pressed down on him, but there was no room left for emotion. Victoria's betrayal, paired with Alexander's cruelty, had drained him of feeling. All that remained was a hollow, automatic resolve to do what needed to be done. Scrolling through the contacts on his phone, his fingers stopped on his lawyer's number. The moment Victoria's condition had stabilized, Liam knew what his next step had to be: divorce. The word echoed sharply in his mind, a term he had never thought would apply to his life. He pressed the call button. "Steve Law Firm, how may I help you?" The secretary's voice was professional, distant. "This is Liam Brown," he said coldly, his voice bold and emotionless. "I need to file for divorce." The call was quickly transferred, and soon a familiar, calm voice responded. "Liam, I'm truly sorry to hear about this. Let me guide you through the process. We'll start by preparing the paperwork. How soon do you want to proceed?" Immediately, Liam replied without hesitation, gripping the phone. The lawyer explained the necessary steps, and when the call ended, Liam felt an unexpected sense of finality. His decision was made. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about cutting the last tie that bound him to Victoria and the life they had built on lies. 3 days later, Liam sat in the silence of his living room, indifferent to the monotony that surrounded him. The quiet felt like it was closing in on him, with each tick of the clock pounding like a hammer, distancing him from the betrayal. His phone buzzed on the table, snapping him out of his stupor. He glanced at the screen. Victoria, his finger hovered over the answer button. After a brief hesitation, he sighed and answered. "Liam," her voice was weak, barely a whisper. "I need to talk to you. Can you come over?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes, he cut her off, not giving her a chance to say anything more. He hung up, put on his jacket, and left without a second thought. When he arrived at her small apartment, the sight of Victoria sitting on the edge of the couch stirred something faint but fleeting inside him. She looked fragile, her skin pale, the bruises around her eyes a harsh reminder of what she had been through. She was no longer the vibrant woman he had once loved now, she was just a shadow of that person. As Liam entered the room, Victoria looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "Liam," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I need you to hear me out." Liam crossed his arms and leaned against the doorframe, watching her in silence. His quiet presence was enough to signal her to continue. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her sobs interrupting her words. "I don't know why I did it. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and now I'm paying for it. Alexander, what he did to me, I never thought it would end like this. I never thought." "You never thought at all," Liam interrupted sharply, his voice cold. "You never considered the damage you'd do to me, to us. You were only chasing your own desires, and now look at where that's brought you." Tears flowed uncontrollably from her eyes, her body shaking with guilt and grief. I know," she pleaded. "I'm begging you, please forgive me. I'll do anything to make it right." Liam slowly shook his head, his expression emotionless. "Forgiveness," he repeated, his tone icy. "Do you really think an apology will fix this?" He stood there, watching as Victoria's sobs grew louder, but he felt no pity. Countless nights he had spent awake, tormented by the memories of her betrayal. She had destroyed everything they had, and now she thought that an apology could make it all better. "I can't give you that," Liam said, his voice steady and cold. "You're only sorry because you're suffering now. But back then, when you left, when you threw away everything we had for a meaningless affair, you didn't care." Victoria lifted her tear-streaked face, struggling to find words. She began, but Liam cut her off. "You made your choice, Victoria," he said, his tone sharp and unyielding. "Now you'll have to live with it." Her sobs filled the room, but Liam turned and walked out without a second glance. The soft click of the door closing behind him echoed down the hallway as he left, a strange sense of relief slowly washing over him. The divorce was swift, with Alexander behind bars and Victoria left in ruins. Without Liam, she had no one. During the property division, Liam remained firm, offering her nothing more than what the law required. He wasn't seeking revenge, just justice. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with the consequences. As time passed, Liam began to adjust to his new life. The sharp sting of betrayal was still there, but it no longer cut as deeply. He buried himself in work, hobbies, anything to keep his mind from wandering back to the moment when his world had crumbled. One evening, as he sat on the porch of his small, new apartment, his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. Liam, Victoria's voice came through the phone, weak and fragile. It didn't sound like the confident woman who had so casually betrayed him. Now, she sounded broken. "What do you want?" Liam asked, his voice weary and drained. I wanted to apologize again," she replied softly. "I know you don't want to hear it, but I'm lost without you. I've lost everything, my job, my friends, even my dignity. I don't know how to move forward." Liam leaned back in his chair, staring at the fading evening sky. Her suffering didn't bring him any satisfaction. He had loved her once, but that love had died the night she left him for his best friend. "You made your choice, Victoria," he said calmly. "Now you have to live with it." "Please," she whispered, her voice filled with desperation. "I don't know what to do." Liam sighed heavily. "That's no longer my problem." There was a long silence between them before she spoke again, her voice trembling. "I understand. I'm sorry, Liam, for everything." He didn't respond. Instead, he ended the call, staring at the phone for a few moments before placing it on the table beside him. The weight of the past few months still hung over him, but it felt lighter now, as if the burden was finally beginning to lift. For the first time in a long while, Liam felt a sense of peace wash over him. The storm had passed, and though the scars remained, he knew he was free from the destruction Victoria had left in her wake. As the months passed, Liam found a new rhythm in his life, one unburdened by the betrayal, heartbreak, and anger that had once consumed him. He moved into a small, quiet apartment on the other side of town, far from the place where everything had fallen apart. This fresh start brought with it an unexpected calm. It gave him the space he needed to focus on healing and rediscovering himself. Slowly, the fog of betrayal began to lift. His new apartment, once sparsely furnished with only the basics: a bed, a sofa, began to feel like home. He took his time selecting new curtains, building bookshelves, and hanging paintings from local shops. Each small addition felt like a step toward reclaiming control of his life, a quiet victory over the past. Liam's office had also transformed, becoming a symbol of his fresh identity. It was stripped of anything that reminded him of his old life with Victoria. The room was filled with things that represented his present, a life free from emotional baggage. One evening, while he was deep into his work, a knock on the door broke his concentration. It was unusual for anyone to stop by without notice, so Liam looked up in surprise. His boss, a man of few words but known for his fairness, stepped in and took a seat across from Liam. "You've been doing great work lately," his boss said, his tone warmer than usual. "I know the past few months have been rough, but you've stayed focused. We've decided to promote you to senior analyst." Liam blinked, momentarily speechless as the words sank in. "Thank you, sir," he replied, still processing the unexpected news. His boss nodded briefly. "You've earned it. Keep up the good work." Standing up to leave, he paused at the door and glanced back at Liam. "Oh, and Liam." "Yes?" Liam asked, curious about the hesitation in his boss's tone. "I'm glad to see you're doing well," his boss said softly, before leaving the room. As the door clicked shut behind him, Liam leaned back in his chair, allowing the moment to sink in. This promotion wasn't just about his career, it was a confirmation that he was finally moving forward, leaving the past behind. Feeling the need to celebrate, Liam reached out to some old friends, the ones he had distanced himself from during his years with Victoria. These were the people who had quietly supported him when his life had been falling apart. They met at a cozy bar in the city centre, sharing stories, laughter, and a few drinks. "I'm really happy to see you back to your old self," said Oscar, one of his closest friends from college, raising his glass in a toast. "You've been through hell, but you've come out stronger." Liam smiled, clinking glasses with Oscar. "Yeah, it wasn't easy, but I'm in a much better place now." Sophie, another longtime friend, leaned forward with a playful smile. "So, any plans to start dating again?" she teased. Liam chuckled softly and shook his head. Not yet. Right now, I'm just enjoying the peace. His friends nodded in understanding, recognizing his need for calm. As the conversation turned to lighter topics, Liam felt a deep sense of gratitude. These were his true friends, the ones who had stayed by his side when everything was falling apart. Unlike Alexander, who had betrayed him completely, these friends had remained loyal and unwavering. While Liam rebuilt his life, Victoria's world continued to crumble. Alexander was now serving a long prison sentence, his trial having turned into a public scandal. Once a charismatic and successful man, he had fallen from grace and was now just another inmate. Victoria, left to deal with the aftermath, found her reputation in tatters. She lost her job, and most of her friends had distanced themselves from her. The bright future she had once envisioned had dimmed significantly. She had tried reaching out to Liam several times, but he never responded. One afternoon, she sat in a shabby cafe, staring down at her phone. She had sent countless messages before, each one more desperate than the last. Now, her fingers hovered over the screen, hesitating on whether to send yet another. Slowly, she began typing, "Liam, I know you probably despise me, and I understand if you never want to talk to me again. But I truly regret everything. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, I would be deeply thankful. I'm not asking for anything else, just your forgiveness." Her heart raced as she hesitated for a moment, then finally pressed send. She stared at the screen, waiting, though deep down she already knew there would be no response. Liam had made it clear whatever they once had was in the past, and that's where it would remain. Meanwhile, sitting on his balcony, Liam gazed at the city skyline, where the sun was slowly setting, bathing the buildings in a soft, golden light. This had become his ritual quiet evenings where he could unwind and let the peace surround him. The pain of the past no longer had power over him. The sharp ache from Victoria's betrayal and Alexander's lies had once felt unbearable, but now they were just distant memories, fragments of a life he no longer lived. The weight of those moments no longer defined him. His phone vibrated on the table beside him, and when he glanced at the screen, Victoria's name appeared. But this time there was no rush of emotion, no bitterness, no sadness. With a slow exhale, he picked up the phone and without hesitation deleted the message without reading it. Whatever she had to say no longer mattered. Liam was moving forward, with no intention of looking back. But a few weeks later, as he was leaving the office, he accidentally bumped into a woman in the lobby. She was balancing her coffee and phone, and in her hurry, the drink spilled on him. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she said, frantically trying to dab at the mess with a napkin. Liam chuckled, amused by her flustered reaction. "It's fine, really. No harm done," he reassured her. She smiled, clearly embarrassed but also warm. "I still feel terrible. Let me make it up to you, coffee's on me." He smirked. "All right, but only if it's something simple, none of those complicated orders." They exchanged a few playful comments before heading to the nearest cafe together, chatting as they went. Her name was Tracy. As they sat with their drinks, Liam felt something unexpected, a connection that wasn't burdened by the past. It was easy and natural. Tracy was intelligent, funny, and genuine, and their conversation flowed effortlessly. By the time they finished their coffee, Liam realized he wanted to see her again. There was no rush, no pressure, just the pleasant feeling of spending time with someone new. They exchanged numbers, and as they said goodbye, Liam felt a small flicker of hope. He wasn't hurrying into anything, but it was nice to feel something fresh. The future, which once seemed uncertain and intimidating, now unfolded with new possibilities. Later that evening, back on the balcony, Liam reflected on the journey he had traveled. The storm of betrayal that had once dominated his life had passed, leaving behind a quiet calm. He had lost much: a marriage, a best friend, but in return, he had gained something far more valuable: his freedom. He had rebuilt his life on his own terms, and now, for the first time in a long while, he felt ready for whatever the future held. As the last rays of the sun vanished beyond the horizon, casting the city in twilight, Liam smiled to himself. He had become stronger, wiser, and most importantly, free. The past was behind him, and the future. It was entirely his. And that, my friend, is the end of the story. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. May the Force be with you.